Okay. All right, let's get into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. It's This is a very important episode. The title is When the Inner Life Meets the Outer Life. And so I've been wondering about the structure of human psychology for a while. There were times where I felt that it was all and totally in the hands of the free will, that the person can define the limits and just the meaning of their life. And I've also seen moments, considered moments where the person, as much as they define, they are found in greater dimensions. They're found in greater definitions. What that means is what appears to us as something animate in higher dimensions can be inanimate. Do you know, for example, we look at an ant, we don't see the sophistication of the human being. And so man may wonder what is he an ant to? Something very notable is that the human being is limited to what it has. I have looked at the life, the inner life of the person. Of course, I should have probably started off by explaining more the context of the title because some people may be new to the talk. Very simple, very simply, guys. Right now, in this current moment that I'm existing, I'm considering that there is an objective component to my moment of being and there is a subjective component. The objective component, very obvious. When I look in the mirror, it's there right now. It's all the objectivity that I acknowledge and I consider. Now, I ask myself, okay, so I'm seeing everything in the room. You know, I even see my body. Now, when I ask myself, what does my mind look like? You know, and I become aware of the subjective existence in the moment, the significance. Every object that I see right now in this room, the fact that it has a name means it has a subjective representation in the linguistic simulation. So what I notice is that there is an objective self, and of course there's a subjective self. The objective self is based on elemental law. The subjective self is based on evocational intent and attention. At first, I had chosen to name the title When the Inner and Outer Life Meet because I wanted to speak about both ways of the approaching the idea from both sides. You know, there are people on this world where their inner life is more significant than their outer life. That's those people, for example, they pay less attention to their outer life. There's some people who their outer life is more important than their inner life, and so they go on living this outer life. They go living this outer life only to realize at the end of their life that there was also an inner life. So I constantly see human beings being born and having different intensities of attention to either their subjective existence or objective existence. In moments where I could tell you that when I was a young kid playing football, soccer, you know, in the court, in those moments where I had the ball, I was dribbling and I was getting ready to shoot it in, kind of snipe it in the corner. In those moments, my subjective life was waiting for my objective life. That means it's as if sometimes your mind can move faster than your body. I'll give you an example. Like I can, well, it happens to me when I walk. Sometimes when I walk, if I feel my inner life is more active, my subjective self is more active, my mind is moving more in the space than my actual physical body. Therefore, the rhythm and the movement of subjectivity is more. So right now I'm seated, I'm like sitting still somewhere giving this talk. The inner life is moving. Now the inner life, I could not distinguish its movement because it was highly locked into the definitions of the outer life. When I began to observe The subjective realm, subjectivity, how imagination appears as if it's your own private room where your visualizations are there. If I visualize right now a unique geometrical shape, you as a person, if you were sitting beside me, could you see that visualization? No. So we see that the human being is in an existential position where it has an inner room of experience and an outer room of experience. So we are actually multidimensional experience-wise, but existentially, guess what? Matter's hovering in space. That's it, right? So you see, sometimes the question of is there something more, or what are we really? It can be the question can be asked in a multidimensional world, or it can be asked in a singular world, or it can be even asked in a void world. It can also be asked in an infinite world, but usually when the subjective realm goes at a certain fast speed, you cannot hold on to it. I have definitely had thoughts that were like literally a bird fly past me really quickly. I noticed the thought was there. I could not fully see it. You know, a lot of my relationship with ideology and knowledge changed when I began to see I am the life in every word that is real to me. That means I notice as a young kid, you see, like you see children, young kids, what do? The kid has a teddy bear. The teddy bear is its best friend. The kid comes to its parents and says, "This is my best friend," you know? And so we see that that child in that moment, first of all, doesn't know about the greater worlds behind its eyes, but to the world that it knows, it has an ability to animate to itself objectivity. So it's like that kid is believing, you can say on some level, the visualization that the teddy bear is a live, real friend, you know? So if we, when we're children, have an ability to make toys into our best friends and imbue the inanimate object animate life in accordance to our inner experience, we see that if we can make a teddy bear alive, we can definitely make ideas ourselves. We can definitely imbue life to subjectivity. And your name is you imbuing life to your subjectivity. I'll tell you something personal. When I was younger, you know, I wasn't a person who, when confrontation came, I would stand my ground. It took me a while, not a while actually, but like, it took me a couple fights in my youth to kind of get a sense of like how I need to treat chaos, you know. There's some people in this world where it's not worth fighting. It's not worth. Sometimes there are some opponents that if you fight, they win instantly because they want you to fight. That means the will of their reality occurs, you know. But anyways, that's definitely a tangent into another talk. But I want to simply say that we imbue life to subjectivity, and we have been living as thoughts. We have literally in the mainstream, I have asked this many people, even if you go ask the religious person, you know, this is one thing that the religious person and the non-religious person, you know, that you can say the secular mind and the religious mind, they have one thing strangely in common. They both acknowledge they have thoughts. So I kind of noticed that language is a way for us to relate an unknown space to the spaces that we have known before. So I noticed a kind of inevitable limitation. It was very fascinating, really. I'll never forget that moment when I noticed language was sparked like fire. We discovered an ability to ascribe subjective visualization to sound. So language, any person, you cannot navigate in the realms of communication unless you have a certain confrontation of multidimensionality and the void. The void is silence. Multidimensionality, how various sentences in various ways communicated are their own universes. You know? That means some people speak because the language is in their mind. Some people speak because they have a vision and they see that vision. It's like a film behind their eyes, and then they share that. You know, so for me, I looked at the educational system, and rather than the question of what does this system want me to do, you know, I came to a point where I asked myself, if I was the founder of knowledge, where would it be heading? Like, I began to think like the drivers of civilization. And I only, you know what I noticed? I noticed that it's like how, what's his name? what's his name? Lao Tzu. I find this is where we're headed as a species. We have dwelled in the realms of solid linguistic ability, and this is something new, guys, but I see it now clearly. There are three phases in the evolution of a living creature through the linguistic simulation or the linguistic realm. So I'm going to tell you our species will go through three phases of evolution through language. And these three phases is, of course, I am kind of, I see it going there. That's why I'm saying it. But vision, of course, has as much freedom as the mind that envisions. I can tell you this, that right now, me and you, whoever's listening to this in 2020, we are alive at the edge of the solidification of language itself. So me and you are strangely like the early settlers in Canada. We are the pioneers of the civility, of the civilization of this universal sector. As the pioneers of the civilization, of this sector of civilization, think of it this way. So I've told you about the objective realm, the subjective realm. Now these kind of the oscillation between these is the animation of the personality. Now, of course, I say that there's also a presence. You know, if you ask me, hey, Mr.Within, like, are you a person right now? I would say the person comes and goes in accordance to the waking conscious state, but there is ultimately an energetic presence here. So this might be strange to some viewers, that I personally can perceive a state, like I can see life as if words never existed and there's still a truth to it. Right now, that truth is not conceptual, it's experiential. You know, I am limited in these talks to speak of what is only in the linguistic simulation, what is in language, at this in the duality of language. At the same time, I consider that language threshold was when I noticed that I have experiences that there have been no words for. I notice in my inner life is perceiving phenomenology that my outer life has never considered, or even the language doesn't have words for, or at least I am not aware of the terminology for it. You know, of course, the human being is like a handful of sand out of an endless beach. No one person can know everything, but what we do is that we make our attention, our knowledge into a vehicle to navigate through the unknown. Poetically, I personally say that your conscious living experience of the moment can be piloted, because I notice that the mind is being the moment. You know, these are good rap lyrics. My mind is my moment is my mind. Like there should be lyrics like that, because in reality it is, you know. And so when I say there's an inner life and outer life, I mean that cause and effect is present in your psychology. The cause seems to be subjective. Me suddenly writing down a sentence that just comes to me, that's like the phenomenology started in my subjective realms, ended in my objective realms. Right now, as I'm speaking, the phenomenology is occurring in my subjective realms, inner life, and then it's being externalized as the outer life. Okay, so I'm saying that there will come a time, not a time, but like when your mind is your moment, you can no longer lie to yourself. And then you see why all the wisdom traditions were like, be humble, young soul, for the cosmos is ancient. An eternal being doesn't need to rush. And so it's as if I have looked at nature often, guys. There was a time I felt like, because I'm a creature in the cosmos, if I really just concentrate on what's a phenomena in the cosmos, I would be able to see at least some influence of an overall rhythm, you know. For example, you Alan Watts said this very incredibly. He said you go to India, like in Western civilization, like he said, if the guy like comes to Western civilization and starts shouting in the streets, "Yo, I'm God! I just got it! Everybody's God!" you know. And then it says, but in if you were in an Indian kind of like, let's say, ancient Vedic kind of culture, you you would be, it's as if you'd go in the streets shouting, "Oh my God, I'm God, everything is God, everything is the self, oh my God," like then in that culture people would laugh. They wouldn't gasp, they would laugh because you have just realized it. You have just realized that there is a potential, as much as all this individual fragmentation and classification of all phenomenology, there can also be a simultaneity to every existential process. That means you can have access to your memories as if you're linearly, it's like, what did I do then? What did I do then? It's like at that time. Or you can be an experience where you have access to all the content of your mind, all the content that is accessible to the edge of your consciousness. The mind is something where usually if there's a physical problem in life in regards to the outer life, you have to have a physical response. Like if you're sitting on the remote control of the TV and you don't realize it, guess what? You need a physical you need to get up from that position of reality, that discomfortable, that uncomfortable kind of experience, you know? The inner life is evocational. It's a strange relationship of energy being structures of thought, being a blueprint to action before the actual physical action, you know? So if you stop physically moving and somebody came up to you, "Hey man, you stopped physically moving. Now, what else could be moving?" You will notice usually when your physicality is more still and silent, you notice movement and noise more, right? So if you look at this kind of pattern in all yogic and meditative practices, is that the person was trying to transcend what they saw because they felt there was more. The unknown is the true teacher. I'm telling you. If it, like, I'll tell you this is something I said in my some of my other talks. Like, imagine, we bring all the greatest teachers of the world, all of them, and they all found you somehow and they imbued you their greatest vision, and you suddenly knew everything all the teachers of humanity had to teach. Now what would you learn next? Do you see the question that it's like we have Maslow's hierarchy of needs in sociology, and we see that the ultimate aim of the social creature is self-actualization. But what is the actuality of this self in that state? And I feel you will always, the unknown is when life is asking you to be more of an explorer than a believer, more of an experiencer than a firm, solidified kind of linguistic existence. It's honestly has to do, usually I think the child's psychology will by some age, I think usually, but I think before the age, what do psychologists say, before the age of 14, like the child solidifies into an individual to itself. Now that individualism has to do with the child's experience. So imagine there's one kid born in the world, and every time this kid goes to speak to people, people just push it aside. "Get out of here, kid." No, this kid has never experienced social validation in a community. Imagine there's a king. There's a king and he has a prince, and the prince is the same age as that other kid, who's never been acknowledged by community. This kid, without even knowing every place he has gone to, it's as if because of who his father was, the kid has also been acknowledged. The kid is also like, oh my, like, so one person, it opens his eyes in think of it this way: before we allocate any sort of resources for the efficiency of civilization or the efficiency of the psychology, every person is bound to the interpretation of their own world. So that means right now, if you're hearing me speak and you have different views than what I'm saying, that's a good sign. That means you are sensitive to a life of your own. And really, when I say within, the whole name Mr. Within is because I want the species to wonder, what is it within you that is looking out your eyes right now? Is it a concept? That's the part where I'm saying no. I'm just shouting at history, and I'm kind of like, I've had moments where I felt emotional, like I was scolding history for just being stuck on language so long. Something is chaotic about history, guys. I want you to think of when idol worship was popular in the world. Actual idol worship, not worshiping like a song idol, like a musical idol, like a musician or something. I'm not talking about celebrities. I'm talking about there was a point that an actual human being picked up like a rock or a piece of tree, I think they were called pantheists, and they saw God in that rock. So suddenly it's like the symbol was the truth at that point. In idol worship, that stuff in front of you was God. Like there's the what is it, the religious story of Abraham. I don't think many people know this about Islam. Many people know about Muslims in the world, that they go there in Mecca, in Medina, is a holy place for the Islamic mind. And it's a holy, as they go there for pilgrimage, they go and they rotate clockwise, around this cubic black building, cubic structure, but it has black kind of cloths, you know, and so usually if you're born as a Muslim, you tend to kind of go there, you know. You can say it's an evolution of Islam, the Islamic mind, to go towards its truth. It's like actually the evolution of any ideological system to behave in a way where it's more coherent to its own definitions. But I'm saying that so this building, they call it the house of God, was because this building used to be a place where idol worshippers would put their idols. It's like they all got together and put their gods like idols. And there's a story of Ibrahim, where Abraham suddenly he goes inside this house and sees all these people worshiping these gods. Right now, I don't want to, I hope you're mindful enough to acknowledge that I'm telling you a story from the 6th century, you know? So be mindful of the ears that you listen to what I'm saying to. Have mindfulness in how you're hearing it. As Aristotle says, it's the sign of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it. But anyways, I'm going to continue this because I think it's important to share. So in that building, the house of God, the place where every Muslim person you ever see is praying towards that direction, you know. So that was a house of idols that were being treated as gods. Abraham comes and sees this and he's like, this is not God. And of course the mindset was there's only one God, you know, one true God, monotheism hence. And so so he goes into that polytheistic community and he's telling them, he's like, this isn't God, man, this is a piece of stone with feathers on it, like a piece of wood with feathers on it. This isn't your God, right? The people are like, Abraham, get out of here. You know, these are our gods. You know, who are you? Get out of here. You know, and so there. Eventually, time goes on, and Abraham's constantly telling these guys, these aren't your gods. And Abraham suddenly one day, all these guys go out and they come back and they see something strange. They see a hammer beside one of the gods, and they see all the statues in that building kind of broken. all the idols are broken. And so Abraham is standing beside the statue, which the hammer is on the other side of the statue, right? And people are like, Abraham, did you break our gods? You know? And Abraham is like, no, this God did it. And the people are like, this is just like, this is an object. How could it move? How could it use the hammer to break the other gods? And that's what Abraham says. If this is an object, how are you treating it as God? Right? So that was a sensitivity to the human mind to stop worshiping objectivity as the ultimate. The attention was simply being piloted on the object. That means imagine concentrating on an image so much that you think that image is the only thing there, right? So it's like Abraham, or we can say in the efforts of human beings, led to a position where we slapped objects out of the face of God, being God. Okay, so object worship, idol worship stopped. Now I thought to myself, wow, it stopped. Now what came after? And subject worship, language worship came after. Language was something that the mind held, so nobody could slap it out of your hand. Do you know? And it had significance because it was new. Language is a technology. It blew people's minds when it first appeared. People were like, whoa, did that guy just say something I could totally understand? Oh my God. So I'm saying that we thought God was in objects. We evolved beyond that. We thought God was in subjects. Now, this is the scary part, that till 2020, we have still been worshiping language as God. We have been still worshiping language as our truth. So do you see what I'm saying? So that's where we are now. And I'm like, holy, like, excuse my language, but like, I was like, oh my God, it's idol worship. And then I saw it. I was walking in the street and I saw it, guys. It was chaotic. Like a part of me was actually crying inside. Where I notice every person is a sequence of language. It's a program. When someone speaks to you, it's as if they are automatically revealing what is real behind their eyes, or why else would that communication come first? So it's a way of kind of, I don't know, but I could totally understand the movie Matrix, why that dude was looking at a screen of just code. Because if that code was the thoughts the beings had, you can just, I can't, we are not in just a biological program. We are also in a linguistic program. And if we can't identify beyond the language, we think we are the language, and that's when you get stuck. Oh, that's when your beliefs become your kingdom and you don't step out of it. And there's a story. There's a story of this prince. He's the oldest prince out of like 3 children, and let me say it like this. There was this king who had 3 children, and the oldest son would always wake up earlier than everyone else, and the guy would go and check out the city. Like, imagine your father has a business and you as the oldest son go check on the inventory, go check on everything, every day in the morning. So anyways, this oldest prince, he would go check out on the different stations of the town early in the morning, but he would also go and speak to the palace guard, who was his childhood friend. So he wouldn't dress like a king. Like at nights he was the future king, but in the day, in the morning, he was dressed as a normal man, and he would go. And so the story goes, as he's going, a beggar comes up to him. And of course, this kid is not without an ego. Like, he knows he's going to be future king. When you know you're going to be future king, there is a strange authority at the back of your ethics that you have to live up to the moment. So that's why the ego often emerges, because the person is consequence and performance oriented psychologically. So anyways, this king, this prince, future king, this prince goes And as he's walking in town, like just a lazy beggar, a guy who could definitely work but doesn't care enough to work, so he wants to take, you know. So the person suddenly comes up to this prince, doesn't know he's a prince. The prince is dressed in normal clothing. And imagine Undercover Boss TV show style. And so the beggar comes up. The beggar comes up to this guy and says, "Please, please," you know. And I think I'm kind of deviating from the actual story. The beggar knows the guy is a prince or something. Let me say it like this. The person comes and asks for wealth, and then the prince just looks at him and says, "You don't know the value of what you're asking. That is why it's not given to you. That is why I won't give you." You know? He says you don't know the value of what you have, so you don't deserve to have more. Right? He's telling this guy. Then he walks up and he goes and he meets his friend and he's got some tea and he takes like tea also to his friend, you know, Royal Imperial, like imperial tea. You know, perks of being friends with, you know, a future king, you know. So guys, just to finish the story and then I'll get to the chat section. This prince is having tea with his friend, and the friend is like some kid that was forced to play soccer with him, and eventually they actually became friends. Souls of content mind, you know. And so what happens is something strange happens as he's there with his palace guard friend. They're talking and laughing, and the guy's telling him what happened right there, you know. And suddenly, the palace guard suddenly holds a spear tight, and his alertness is high, you know. So the palace guard instantly tells the prince to go back, and someone is approaching the gate. And who is approaching the gate? This sadhu, this person who is in like this sage, this wandering sage, enlightened sage, right? And the sage comes to the gate, and he comes, and it's as if he knows who the prince is, and he says, "I am here to save you, prince." You know? And the prince, his ego sets in, you know? Some people who don't care about, are not too life sensitive, they allow their egos to bulldozer over the moment sometimes, you know? The prince says, "You are here to save me, you random, like, traveling like, you know, you random traveler, you know, traveling sage are here to save me." He says, "Do you know who I am? Do you know what I'm standing on? Do you know what kingdom is here?" And in that moment, it's subtle, you know, but the palace guard friend is like, okay, this doesn't seem threatening, but he's still on guard. And in that moment, the sage looks at this prince and says, "I am not here." He says, "I am here to save you, not from others, but from yourself." And that's how you, in some sense, slam down the ego of a king. The ego gets power when it blames externality, when it blames the other. But when the self is blamed, the ego has to look at itself, so it has to reverse engineer. So the archetype, in some sense, breaks to itself when it's told to look within. He says, "I'm here to save you from yourself." That's the moral of the story. I don't know what happens then. Maybe they offer the sage tea. Maybe the sage turns into like a breeze of light and like it leaves the scene. But the whole idea of it was that the sage had come to save the man from himself. And I find we are 8 billion Homo sapiens, creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere, and we have to save ourselves from the way we allow the architecture of language to influence us, to shape us. right? So you got to see that human life is actually just sight. It's ultimately on the subconscious level a reaction to emptiness. That means be compassionate to everyone, because everybody, if they really could see where we are as creatures, would probably freak out. Our civility would look like our civilization looks like a dream, because it's like everything's in the void, you know? So the macrocosm is a suggestion that the future will always be beyond man's perception. So really what it means is that it's like sight in existence, and it's like I either do nothing or I do something. Either ultimately there is an effort or there isn't an effort. And that's what I think living is. Existing is, it's just, you don't need effort. You don't need effort to realize you're existing. It's just instant. But we need effort in building. Do you know? So guys, my attention's coming to the chat section. Welcome everybody. Dominic says thanks for fellow being for sharing with us today. Yeah, thanks. Thank you guys for listening. The term "not this or that" comes to me. Yeah, Dominic, may I ask if you're listening? That's in you came to that term from the Upanishads, perhaps? Because in the Upanishads, there's this really nice, interesting saying that there would be so many people attempting this enlightenment game, and they would get certain consequences, and then the liberated guy would come and say, not this, not this. It wouldn't say not this or that, but he would just keep saying that the belief of finding something that is a dynamic state in a static photo is impossible. That means it's like the guru is sitting there and people are just drawing pictures of what they think the world is, and they keep giving it to the guru, and the guru is like, what is this? He's like, it's not this, man. It's not a picture you draw. It's too dynamic than a static concept. So it's alive. Do you see? The inner life tends to feel kind of like building blocks, because we look at the outer life and we see it as sort of particles in composition. A person can get embarrassed in front of others, but a person can also get embarrassed in front of themselves, as if you are alone. And so I feel we have to, as a civilization, calm down, stop wanting a sort of perfection of self-gratification. We have to realize either there comes collective efforts or nothing happens. We all live in our own islands until the end arrives, until extinction shows its face. It's kind of fascinating. I feel we can no longer think of success as the inspiration. It's like Elon Musk. I remember he said something to me. Elon Musk is it's a privilege to be alive while he is. Like, I feel him to be the champion of the outer technologies. The champions of the inner technologies will start from individuals, but eventually will become collective movements, will become the compassionate reverse engineering of certain static values in a system. So when I say a person can get embarrassed in front of themselves, they can be dishonest to themselves. The person can make a decision that was, let me tell you what's dishonest. If I'm in a situation and I have this thought of what I want, let's say hours, like let's say 10 hours from that moment, my behavioral judgment is based on an image that is not here yet. This is why sometimes when you hunger, like see physical hunger, definitely like it's like the objective realm, you got to listen to the program of life. You can't really the program of biology. Really like the human purpose, I guess ultimately biologically is to maintain biology. Just experience what you are and maintain it, you know, tunnel through existence as a moment of attention. When the inner life meets the outer life, it tends to be this way, that the outer life doesn't accept the inner life. But when there come, until the inner life learns to accept itself, that means who you think you are behind your eyes, let's say it comes to some person in a story, a character in a story, that character in the story that you are, if you cannot accept your free will, you will be pushed around by the programs of nature. That means if you don't move, the world will change you. If you consciously act and move, you will change the worlds you perceive. Elon Musk said, when you start a business, you know, it's like, at least for him, he had a friend who came and showed him, like he had someone who I wouldn't call a friend, but, or maybe it was his brother, I don't know. He had a friend who showed him rockets kind of being an incredible waste of money. But this man still had the vision. He continued. He saw ahead. And in his continuation, he had this perception where rather than me thinking of trying to make a successful business all the time, he said, let's have this vision where it's a failing business. Let me assume the end result is extinction. So how can I reduce the percentage of failure rather than trying to just endlessly in one narrow ego, just in one state of mind, handle something that must be attended to in many states of mind? There's video on YouTube called Hope in Humanity Restored or something. And it's showing all these people in random moments of life in their boring lives where they suddenly notice something real that needs helping, you know? And that was fascinating for me, that we are not selfish creatures. We just have different eyes. And we have to have an ability to not only be comfortable and content with our inner realms, but that means when you become comfortable in your inner realms, when you're aware of what you know and what you don't know. You know? That's wisdom too. Being aware of what you don't know yet. At least noticing what direction it is. Guys, I have a very unique childhood memory, which I want to share. I think I was like 5, 6 or 5. And I was in Iran, city of Tehran. I was in, I have a twin brother also. And me and my brother were in the yard. we would go and we would try to collect rocks. I remember my brother had found like this blue kind of rock and it fascinated all of us. So we started just as kids looking through the yard, trying to find rare stones. And I remember I was at some place. It was me, my brother, my cousin, younger cousin, and this girl who was the daughter of the security of my grandparents' house, you know. And so all four of us are looking. We're just kind of squatted with sticks. We're like destroying my grandfather's yard to kind of find stones, you know. And I'll never forget it. I remember digging, and I suddenly came to a place where there was a lot of worms in the dirt. This is a 5-year-old me, by the way, you know. And I remember digging, and as I was digging, I was just throwing intensely the dirt out, and I look to the right, and I see a ring. I see a ring in the dirt, a giant ring, and it had like this kind of dark red stone, you know? And the ring seemed to be like a ring that had a, what do you call it? Like religious, like in Iran, there's a lot of religious rings. So it had religious writing on it, you know? And so I find a ring. Imagine like being like, I don't know, 6 years old or something, and suddenly finding like a treasure in the dirt. And I remember I took it up and I told everyone, and we were all panicking and surprised. And I went and washed the ring, and we all looked at it, you know. And I don't know what happened to that ring. I think it's in Iran. I'm speaking in Canada right now. That experience of something that was meaningless pursued suddenly became meaningful or showed meaning is just man's exploration beyond the veil of thought. And I notice we kind of call our imagine call what's like what's occurring behind our eyes is thinking, and we say we have thoughts, and that's it. The inner realm stopped evolving. It's like like we philosophers have been silenced. The more technological the world becomes, the more it wants to forget where it came from because it's evolving into somewhere else. Yeah, yeah, I agree with what you're saying, and yeah, but you see, the explanation for that attributelessness is still in a civilization. It is still in a story. So I'm telling you, I totally agree. I have mentioned in other talks that there is, once you go truly within, the external and the internal don't no longer exist, right? But the thing is, the question has to come. Let's assume right now you were the most liberated, and you were at the pinnacle of all sort of migrating soul kind of like the peak of the evolution. Okay, you reached the ultimate. Okay, you got the greatest gift this world could offer. Now what? So you see, it's the inner transformations don't necessarily satisfy the external maintenance. So I'm saying it's like we reach a point where we're like, okay, we are free. Now what? And with freedom comes the responsibility of the extension of design. So I'm like, okay, regardless of how much I think the light is in my eyes and the person's enlightened or whatever, you know, like regardless, it's like, why does that even matter? Why does that archetype make sense at all? I notice there is a civilization that, of course, it's 250,000 years it's developed, but what's been developing? It has been developing for 4 billion years. So there is a, you can say, a 4 billion-year-old civilization, the science project called humanity here, and we are not attending to it, and we're just going into inner states of nullification and just basking in bliss. Like that is not enough. There needs, I am, of course, you gotta, people listen to me, you gotta realize something. I don't have the same school of thought, like even though I speak about the mystical experience often, but I am not telling people you need to escape into higher dimensions. You have to build paradise on earth, and at least the effort can be there. So I'm saying, regardless of how much your intelligence is, Rabindranath Tagore has a great quote that he's kind of concluded this in. He says, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. That means he thought life was fun. It was just fun, go after fun, you know that loving fun, you know. Then he says, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. That means joy was the dream. He says, I awoke and I saw that life was service. He awakened from all his youthful simulations of good enough into a reality that there was so much more to the actual landscape. I awoke and I saw that life was service. Then he says, I acted, and behold, service was joy. So he lived the individual inner life to a point where he saw, okay, after you've reached the pleasures and the greatest bliss of the inner life, it's like the next evolution is pay attention to your outer life. This is why in Zen they said enlightenment was like a round circle. You are at first escaping what you dislike confronting through a certain subjective lens, only to realize that it was never important how the subjective lens, when you know, it's like when you remember, as the yogis would say, you find the rhythms of your divine remembrance. So intuition can appear on some level as like an invisible other, like the logos, as the ancient Greeks acknowledged, that inner guiding voice, or it can appear as like this storehouse of impressions, and as the person looks more in, like it shines the conscious spotlight into the unconscious, suddenly it's like the more they see, it's like what was there before. It will eventually take the psychology of the human being to a moment where action and non-action are indistinguishable. Yeah, there we go. You can't discriminate between them. They're the same moment. So what does that mean? That means yogic thought and meditation and wisdom is trying to take you as a being into your experiential vision more than into your conceptual vision. Right? Now I'm looking at society and I'm seeing it's too artificial. That means it's like you can say the human being is, before he created artificial intelligence, he was acting artificially intelligent. Do you see what I mean? That means unauthenticity is occurring. And this is denying the world from the richness of people's inner realms. That means by people trying to fit into a system, like how messed up is this? There's 8 billion unique people, unique eyes on this world, unique DNA, and they all have to fit into the same system of valued education. So I'm saying it's like we're creating one system, we're creating one doorway for 8 billion people. You know how hard, even the more the population increases, the more educational systems are going to become businesses. I think what's gonna happen is either the economical sector is gonna swallow the educational sector, or the educational sector is gonna swallow the economical sector. That means, imagine every business organization is also a school. Like the person living there is also learning there. You know. when the inner life meets the outer life, we can say it's like fresh eyes gazing upon a world. And so you can move the inner, like the inner life is the context to life. The outer life is what the main concept appears as, which to us is our biological objective being. I feel you will, every person who really wonders about what this life is will eventually come to a point where, just like how Rabindranath Tagore was saying, service was joy, there came a moment where it was as pleasing to see the potential advancement of the civilization rather than seeing nothing at all. You know, it's as if, like, there's a quote from Dylan Thomas where he's telling his father on his deathbed, "Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage against the dying of the light." What that means is it is the nature of the free will. You know, your free will, imagine it's this kind of powerful beam. Do you know? And so it's as if rage against the dying of the light. That means you are a conscious being. And so that means be conscious as the pilot, regardless of what happens in this life. It's like the rebellion of consciousness against the conscious by enduring as it is. So he's like, live on, even though his father was on his deathbed. So that rage against the dying of the light, that's when the original, or we can say your true nature, reprograms the outer nature. That's the only way compassion can exist also. The inner life has seen or analyzed the outer life to a degree where it realizes the less turbulent it is, the more smoother the flight of civilization will be. Pretty much we're traveling eyes in the cosmos. I find it fascinating. It's as if, like, I think we should call it the law of limitations. That when two peoples communicate with one another, let's say person A was communicating to person A and B should acknowledge that they do not have each other's realms. So person A looks at person B and person B looks at person A, but they have no idea how each other is seeing themselves. So in some sense, person A and person B, there is a law of limitations, because every person, the mind appears in its own room first, in its own sphere of conscious containment. It then chooses. So what that means is literally there is a sphere around every person, and if they are in the sphere, they are defined by the subjective realm. If they are outside of the sphere, they observe the objective and subjective realm. So regardless of whether you call it, you extract symbol, like we define it as the laws of the cosmos or the laws of nature, or certain scientific laws. Eventually it's a moment of effort and position. And so effort in position, as if the effort is imposing a sort of containment of the moment through a storyline. It's fascinating. It's like we are way more multidimensional than we can believe. So guys, I'm reaching the end of this talk. If there's anything people want to ask about this talk or the title, feel free. There is one story that ultimately will kind of really make vivid what the intention of the title. There's a guy, or let me say it like this. This is a good story. This kid joins monk school, and he's assigned to a senior monk. And as monks, they take these vows and they renounce material desire, so material life, right? So that a monk never has too much fun. this junior monk and senior monk, they're walking, they're going for a walk, you know, and the junior monk is new, so he's trying to do everything as perfectly as the senior monk does. He's kind of like living in the image of the senior monk. As they're walking by, they see this incredibly beautiful woman who can't get across like this kind of stream, and she needs like male assistance, you know. The junior monk is like, we're monks, no way, no way we're gonna help her, like it's obvious. And to his surprise, he sees the senior monk go there, ask the you know, the kind lady what's going on, and the lady says, I need help getting across, you know. And so the monk grabs her and just walks through the stream and puts her on the other side, and she thanks him, you know. And the monk comes back and they leave, and this kid is like horrified. This kid is like, what the it's like, like my senior does this, but I'm like the Jew, like we as monks are not allowed. You know, it's like this is against the whole constitution of our temple. What is this? So he holds it in. He holds it in. He can't say anything. Of course, the guy's a senior monk. He's new. So he's going, and after 20 minutes, very politely, he says, Sir, how was it that we are told we're not allowed to touch women, but you carried that girl and you picked her up and put her on the other side of the stream? And the kid's respectfully asking this. The most intelligent tend to have the most respect internally for the moment, you know. The senior monk smiles in response, and when he speaks, it's as if he's about to kind of like, well, he looks at the kid, junior monk, and he kind of gives him the full view, and he says, listen, I picked her up there and I put her down there. You have been carrying that girl in your mind for 20 minutes. And the kid suddenly realizes, oh my God, this renunciation from material desire is not like you being like an artificial robot. It's you, in some sense, realizing you are choosing how much a sort of subjective outline to the moment remains in your attention. So you see, imagine two lovers who are not obsessed about thinking each other, but when they meet, it's as if what they have done has become their lives, you know? So being sensitive to how the outer realm, the objective realm, influences your subjective realm, your inner realm. The content of the inner realm is again evocational. So sometimes I've sat down kind of trying to wonder through my own philosophical gaze, like, if reality didn't exist, would imagination or the ability to imagine still exist? Sometimes I've wondered if the ability to imagine perhaps could transcend the body. For me, I do see something beyond the physical body, but I don't see it as traditional spirituality sees it. I don't personally see, I don't see a personality to my soul. Ultimate, the soul of my soul there's no personality. So what I mean by that is we can exist as creatures that can appear to our own selves as if we are non-existence. We are sight and non-existence. I remember terming it empty seeing, empty dash seeing, or sight in sight, the sight of emptiness, as if emptiness is seeing something, is seeing emptiness. So in the psychological, we can say depths underneath the surface of the oceans of modern psychology, we find human behavior to be a vast response and an accumulation of many types of responses, many types of attitudes and algorithms, you know, and it's like there's a coagulation of it all. Sometimes for me, I've been so fascinated that I've read something, like I've explored, kind of studied something in history, and only to come and find that the significance of it had nothing to do with the ideology. Ideology tends to usually be a finger pointing to an experience, and usually the experience of the author, you know. So I found myself fascinated about, as if like, okay, so if there is no soul but there is something else, what is that then? And this is my response, is that it's a field. It's a field of intelligence. It's literally a field of intelligence. There is no individual consciousness. It's like that which is moving individual consciousness is non-individual. So ultimately, at the edge of the wall of our psychology, we find the attributeless. So I found something so profound that, and this was in my youth, I was looking, and in for example, the Islamic context, there is, what do you call it? There is the words of 99 words, names of God, words that kind of reflect God's attributes. And that's why rosary, the tasbih, the rosary bead of Islam, is kind of has 99. There's 99 names of God. You know, it has 99 beads. And so imagine the person having the rosary in their hand, and with each one saying the name, each name of God, which is an attribute of the cosmos. You see, because when you make the creator inconceivable, you have no justification for any sort of action. So ultimately, we are left, even the most religious people on this earth had to at some point confront that the religion they saw was the religion their eyes authorized. And every person's genetical makeup and exposure and history in life is a total different composure. That means we are living artwork. And the art that we see in society, it is the extension of the inner realms into the outer. So I find that instead of us constantly being in a debate of considering, are we purely material creature, or are we an unknown immaterial creature, we are suddenly stopping the war of the dichotomy, like the duality. The only way is you balance. So it's like a certain amount of human psychology requires to balance itself by no longer fearing the chaos or desiring the order. The mind just becomes itself. It becomes, you realize it is okay to be simply you. Prior to anything else, you are just you. Like it's okay for existence to just, in a static, still and silent moment, to be aware of how it's being everything. But I'm just saying that this being has the biological ability of action and effort. So it's as if I remember, I used to like meditate a lot. You know, I mean, for me now the concept has become like second nature. But it's like, there was a time where I had Tibetan Buddhist kind of beads around my neck, and I held kind of Tibetan Buddhist meditation in a really high light. And I still do, you know. But now my experiences have made a different me, you know. So the past has become a pure memory, emotion. A pure memory is an emotion also. My father, I told him about meditation, asked him, how do you see the concept? And he told me, like, he was walking in the airport and he saw some monks at an airport, and he's like, it's like they're trees. So it's like, don't be a tree. And then I was like, wow, as if we have this evolutionary advanced biological opportunity to go and be active in the world, and we are just simply choosing to exist in the inner realm without realizing the kind of the civilization that requires attending to. I'm saying, like, there is something that surpasses goodness, and its greatness. That means regardless of the odds, the effort's outcome is kind of like a foundation of is a core foundation of the intent of the person's behavior. There is this idea that randomity is chaos, and in some sense order is choosing to hold, like, imagine there's a room with kind of like bunch of like balloons moving in the room, and they're moving like just meaninglessly, and suddenly you choose to hold one balloon in your hand and you bring it down. Then you hold another balloon in your hand and you put it down on the ground. Then you find another balloon, put it down on the ground. Eventually you have made the chaos of a three-dimensional space and made it ordered two-dimensionally. So I'm saying it's sometimes you gotta exert the free will. Children feel they have to always dependency. The child is born being dependent on the environment for its survival. This is why love is something that, based on how much the world cares for the existential being, that person is going to be comfortable enough to be civil. The study of language is the next grand Rubik's Cube, and has been for a while, of civilization. For psychologists, try to try to, like, I think every person who just looks at the problem will have an insight to share. That how is language being experienced, and what to do with the ever presence of an energetic witness. It's like if we were to ask energy, hey man, what's your purpose? And energy would be like, to express. Energy would say, my purpose is the universe. Many systems, many dimensions. However, the order of the chaos of the cosmos is that the free will is being one moment. And you can utilize this. This is when you come truly to the philosopher's table, when you're not afraid of the experiencer that you're being. And that's when you come into mastery of your inner realm. When you're no longer afraid of confronting the moment that, regardless of however you see it, it's a changing universe. Like, just like you don't need to prove this. Even every person can see they are not who they were 10 years ago. Now, even though they've been saying it's me, they've been calling the moment themselves, right? But the moment has really changed. The objective content has changed, and the subjective content has changed. The subjective content has changed mainly because the objective content went through a sort of journey of experience. Okay, so guys, I don't know really how to engage the chat section at this point. But just being sensitive that the language the content of the moment doesn't necessarily define all of it, right? That's when I say language worship is out of control. I feel, Susan, in the chat section, there's nothing to figure out. I feel that it's as if the moment the eyes open, the ink has already been made contact with the empty page. Okay, I feel that we can live with completely solidified, like imagine if the mind was strangely, like it could follow the pattern of a substance. It would be as if like we are looking at things objectively, like a solid state. Like things are only real in this structure, and this is the only path, and this is the only way, and this is the only solution, and this is the only tunnel. Well, you got to realize at some point, if we are being humble and we are saying we don't know, this world is too big for one person to know everything, do you know? So that means any effort of the personality will feel void overall. Language is your own ship. You steer it wherever you like. But really, the effort of, I think someone spoke about it. What was his name? I feel the ego is not something to escape. It is a strange inner technology. It's a strange tool. There is something that's happening on this planet that we cannot just be convinced by our inner realms about it. Only through our living engagement does that unknown truly show us what the world is. Be- okay. I'm sure. So welcome to the chat, Scotch. You ask an important question. It's a question that has, believe it or not, has entered my mind at some point. It entered my mind when I was in Italy in a hotel. But like, so you say, why not just commit suicide and merge with infinite, even if we are already infinite? Why not just end the illusion of separation? Sure. Here's the thing, man. It's always easier to break something than build it. It's always easier. You know, a building takes many years to structure, to have meaning, to finally the architect going in the building and being like, yes, there's something here now, you know? But it's in one day that can be demolished. So what I'm saying is that just be sensitive that thoughts come and go, and to act upon them is in some sense not realizing that you're not just a creature of language. Every concept you have is in the spotlight of an attributeless present attention. At least this is my perception of it. I'm not saying this means don't do anything because you're consciousness and consciousness is a fabulous mystery. I'm not saying don't live. I'm just saying that here's the choice. There's something given. You don't know if it's good or bad. You don't know what it's going to be in the future. The unknown is unknown. That's the whole point of it. But the thing is that something is given. There is a strange evolutionary opportunity, and to anybody who I feel the concept of suicide comes, just go read history. You'll be like, holy shit, the savageness and messed up lives that my ancestors live compared to the civilization and advancement of technology I have now. You will see, trust me, it's your attention. I say this, whoever controls your attention. I'm just saying, guys, it's too unknown to make a decision. That's what I'm saying. We are observers of it first. Then we choose to act. Now, our action can be chosen based on a choice where we're conscious. You see, that's it. It's like here, eyes have opened, landscape. From this landscape, you build your correct characteristics in accordance to your actions and experiences. So, Scotch, I'll tell you this. Because it's too damn easy, because it's boring, because the unknown is something where you must you it's like how can I tell you, someone once told me this, and it satisfied a very chaotic outlook I had on life, right? Because the more materialistic you are, the less ideas are meaning have a color for you, I can say, you know. So it's like or let me say it like this. Sometimes the inner phenomenology doesn't need to touch the outer life. The chaos doesn't need to externalize it. You just let that burning flame inside just go extinguish inside in your inner realms. Some ideas you just watch like as if it's a movie. When you go watch a movie, do you go try to go enter inside the screen and be one of the characters? No, you watch, you just observe. So it's like attaining a sort of mastery of being comfortable if life was pure stillness, silence, meaninglessness. When you can be comfortable with the unknown, then you don't want to constantly have a solution to it. You live rather than just try to exist in structure. Yeah, that's interesting. So, Scotch, what do you think of this idea? So, guys, I'm responding to the chat section here. What do you think of this idea that the person has to create truth experientially by living, rather than, in some sense, find a truth? Of course, guys. By the way, anybody listening to this, the reason I chose the name Mr. Within, because I'm just some guy in this universe of countless stars, like just talking, right? So I'm just telling you that really I find the best thing that the language of others can be a mirror to how your own mind expresses subjectivity. So Scotch, I think that just observe life until you realize why you have free will. Don't like there's no need. It's like Sadhguru said this really cool story. He said like you can be a CEO and then go to a vacation, but if you stay in that vacation spot for too long, all the problems you had in that environment will come pouring into your mind in this environment. Let me tell you, Scotch, why you may feel kind of disconnected from it, because your own effort is required and it's not happening. That means you are waiting for something to move your inner realms, but you haven't noticed like your eyes. When you notice your eyes and you really truly realize it, I say you have realized something that no one in the world can ever understand. You have to at some point look at people in this world and be like, I respect you all, but I know that what I see can never be what you see. And so we are journeyers through our own sight, finding ourselves on the same rock. And I've been sitting and wondering, and like, what is this advancement? Like when you walk in the downtown area of anywhere, I'm telling you, just take a notebook or something, or just playfully entertain this. Just see the stores. Just look at what kind of demands the stores are supplying, and you will see they are all for an artificial paradise. They're gonna sell paradise soon. Virtual reality technology may testify. There can be states where your mind appears liquid. There's 50% the moment is unknown, 50% the moment is known. There may come states where you may feel 100% you know what's going on. That's like too solid. You're literally like an object in that, like ice in that state, you know? Like room temperature water is like 50, again, 50 unconscious, 50 conscious, 50 known, 50% unknown. And mysticism and yoga, which I say is not for the faint of heart, is to dare wonder about the 100% unknown while you're 100% still in it, like you're alive. While you're alive, you wonder about the truth of your own truth, you know? About time, Scotch. About time, you know. So, guys, I wanted to say that if every day happens once, and you are the author of the significance of your experiences, then the task of living is really, I think, to observe existence, then trust what you are and engage, and then recalibrate. So it becomes an observe, action, observe, action, observe, action. The action is trusting the objective realm. The observance is trusting the subjective realm, the inner realm. When I say inner life, so the person's like, what do you mean inner life? So you mean an inner self? And I'm like, yeah. So because our experience of livelihood is open through the dimension of a self, of a human self. So really, if we were to just travel into a portal and go to another world, we would be identifying everything in that world in accordance to our past world. You know, so your conditioning, everything you've experienced in this life, is somehow content to access. Your mind can, if you, the more you think you're an actual character, a sort of egoic construct, the less you have access to the experiential field. The less you it's like because your filtration of how you receive the unknown is through a certain character in a story. You are lost into your own, not lost, but it's like, unless it's like the person is being picky. The consciousness, when it's being picky, it goes off rhythm from its true nature, I think. So anyways, guys, I hope this talk was helpful. Great comments. Unfortunately, I couldn't engage all of them, but I can say that you have one lifetime to study your mind, with the realization that no one else has them. That's why I started caring about what is this? Okay, so they say I have a mind. So what is this mind? And I looked at different institutions, and I realized Eastern psychology has come to the notion of the mind through the tendence to discipline. The Western part of the world, they have come to this through the tendence to freedom. So Western civilization, the psychology of the identity of the being is freedom. This whole wave of political correctness happening in the West is all about freedom at the end of the day. You know, but true freedom means an ability to not impose but to understand, because we are, think of it this way, as each person in the darkest hour, as Rabindranath Tagore says, like the bird feels the warmth, begins to see dawn, the greatest light comes at the greatest darkness. So once you live enough cycles of dualistic, you know, once you live many lives in one life, you become aware automatically, I think, of your objective and subjective realm. And so your contentment is your vision, you know? Reality is not just a subjective kind of virtual reality machine. You know, it's like there is something alive here that in that it's the energy. It's like I'll say this riddle: consciousness, the hard problem of consciousness, will be only solved if the civilization, if the universe realizes it is already home. Because I feel it may be chaotic to modern philosophy. I'm thinking like philosophers in 100 years from now on have to find ways of kind of explaining to the cyberspace culture the relationship of the natural and unnatural simulations of intent. Really, I'm saying we gotta pilot ourselves as the presence of attention. The pilot of consciousness navigates the whole plane of existence. You know? So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. And 4 billions of this science project called humanity after 4 billion years, I think it's worth caring about what if there was the great efficiency rather than the great despair. You know? Much blessings.